Welcome, everybody, back to the Friar Talk YouTube and podcast channel. Today, we're going to be kind of going over our expectations for both Yu Darvish and Chris Paddack for the rest of the year. Now, if you guys don't know, both of these guys are on IL. Kind of expected to come back soon. The most recent thing I've heard about Paddack is about a couple weeks ago he was throwing, and the thought was mid to late August. That's everything I've seen. So, assuming we're going to see Paddack either for, probably like a week from now, maybe 2 weeks from now. Darvish, on the other hand, had a back injury, and things are a little bit more up in the air with him. There was talk that he was going to be able to pitch his most recent start, which would be today, I believe, or maybe tomorrow, one of the two. But he's not ready to go. They signed Arrieta to kind of pick up his spot, and he's probably going to be back in, I would say, like 2 weeks, hopefully. I mean, that's the thing. It's kind of like up in the air, but what are your guys' thoughts on, and you could start out, Isaac, what are your thoughts on these two guys in terms of injury? And then we'll talk about performance for the rest of the year. But when do you expect both these guys to be back, Isaac?
I think late August is reasonable for Chris Paddack. We've seen him throwing in, oblique strains for anyone who, I'm pretty sure everybody has suffered some sort of leg strain, whether it's groin, hamstring, something. They're the worst. They are very uncomfortable to walk on, pitch on, whatever it is, hit on, run on, everything you can think of. So with those kind of strains, you definitely want to make sure that they're fully healed, because the chance of re-injury of those is very, very high. You see it all the time. Re-injuries happen all the time, but you don't let them completely heal. Good thing is Chris Paddack doesn't have to run or anything, but pitching has a lot of leg movements and everything, so you want to make sure that's healed. And I don't think anyone really expected us to really need Chris Paddack this bad. It feels like our whole season is kind of riding on Darvish, Snell, Musgrove, Paddack. It's riding on all of them, and we expected them to be solid, but it hasn't been the case so far. Now, regarding Darvish, back injury, 35 years old, those two things don't really coincide well together. Getting up there in age and having a back injury, you definitely want to make sure that's also healed properly as well, especially because this isn't only an investment that we gave up Davies and a couple of prospects for. It isn't just an investment for this year. It's an investment for the next, I believe, at least two. So you got to make sure that's good as well. You don't want him to re-injure or have any long-term injuries, because he's already up there in age. So you got to be careful with that. So hopefully we see him within the next 2 weeks as well.
Yeah, and the only speaking on Darvish, we kind of seen the same thing with Clayton Kershaw in the back. We've seen Kershaw a lot of the time for the Dodgers with back injuries, and they just kind of happen over and over again. So it's one of those things where you don't want to rush Darvish back considering his age, because if you do, you're going to lose him for like a month, because that's what the Dodgers did. Kershaw's just got moved to the 60-day IL. He's not going to be back till the end of September, and we don't want to lose our ace like that. Snell and Musgrove have been great as of late. Musgrove had a really bad last outing, but that's only one. Snell's been improving a lot. So having those two, really improve kind of sweetens the blow, but we can't lose Darvish for another month, because, we can't rely on Arrieta and Weathers to be at the back end of the bullpen. We need three solid guys, and then we might need to bring up Adrian Martinez right away, because Weathers has been struggling a lot. So I feel like taking a little bit extra time to prepare yourself for playoffs and not just the now is the more important thing. So let Darvish really be comfortable with where he is with his back injury. And then Paddack, we always kind of thought he would be back at the end of the month, if not early September. Him throwing is a really good thing. Hopefully there's no kick. God, I'm forgetting the word right now, but hopefully he doesn't re-injure it. But back go. God, I was blanking on that word. Hopefully there's no setbacks. He should be good for the end of the month. Just hopefully he continues to build off where he has this whole season, and we get some really solid innings out of him. And hopefully he can just show us that, he's going to be that guy in the future.
Yeah, I think that's pretty accurate where they're at. So, I mean, especially hopefully sooner or later, both these guys, but you don't want to see anything long-term, especially with Darvish, like you guys mentioned, 35 years old and a back injury. Those do not go well together. But what about in terms of performance? I actually think that we've seen Chris Paddack look a lot better lately. Now Darvish has really gone downhill as of late. He did have the one outing where he allowed the 2-run bomb. I believe it was to Christian Walker, and then he really settled in and he was great. And then he came out the next outing, and the Padres got absolutely smoked by the Diamondbacks. With him, it's hard to tell, what's been the reason for this like downfall in performance. I think injuries are absolutely playing a part. I think that is a huge factor. I also think that the ban on substance is going to affect him. Now, we had talked about this before. That doesn't mean he's a cheater. It doesn't mean anything like that. What he did was legal. And I get kind of confused when people are like, well, yeah, Darvish was a cheater. Like, no, those substances were legal. And I'm not even necessarily talking about spider tack, but for instance, rosin and sunscreen isn't allowed. So he has been pitching with that for what, 30 years? He's been pitching with some sort of thing. He's a guy that heavily relies on off-speed pitches. So I do think that is a huge factor in his play, going down. Now, one thing I'll talk about, because you guys also were talking about long-term for Darvish, I think, the sudden ban on a lot of these substances that, a lot of the pitchers rely on, and we've talked about how a lot of numbers went down drastically right after that happened. Having a whole offseason to kind of work with it and find different ways to go through, your progressions and whatnot, that's going to help a lot. So I do think that we're going to see Darvish have, a bounce back season next year. However, I'm very concerned about him for the rest of this season. And honestly, I feel like I'm a little bit more concerned about him than Paddack right now, which is really weird to say. But where are you guys at on these guys?
Yesterday, coincidentally, regarding pitching, I saw a tweet. It was on this day, Kevin Brown threw a 9-inning shutout against the Astros or something. And obviously Kevin Brown was the ace of that 98 World Series team. He was one of the best pitchers in baseball at the time. Now it's a matter of, because this team desperately needs someone like that, who's going to step up and be the ace that we so desperately need, because we're in desperate need of one right now. We're in desperate need of someone who's going to go out there and just pump and give this team the energy and the spark to win a ball game, because I don't really think we have one of those right now. And it used to be Yu Darvish before, all that sticky stuff went away. It used to be Yu Darvish. I went to Darvish start, and it was great. He pitched fantastic, and this team came out with a 6-2 W. And right now, we don't have one of those guys that can do that, Regarding Yu Darvish, though, realistically, when I talk about guys like that, it needs to be him. He needs to come back. He needs to regroup, find his stuff, because it's been really tough seeing him. His fastball looks weak. Most of his stuff isn't moving the same way, obviously because of the ban of the substances. But it doesn't look the same. His last good start was against the Diamondbacks at home. I think I remember seeing a stat that he is better at home. However, he needs to be the ace that we expected him to be. He came in, he pitched opening day because everyone thought he was going to be the ace, and he was that for a while. He needs to regroup and bounce back to form, because that is what we need right now. At the beginning of the season, I had us winning 95 games. We need to go 28-13 the rest of the way in order for that to happen. The chances of that, obviously, very bleak. However, the only way we do that is if this pitching rotation finally starts to pick it up. Now, regarding Paddack, we don't need Paddack to be an ace. Ever since really end of May, early June, Paddack has been pretty solid outside of a couple of outings where he's gotten demolished. He's been solid, and we need him to just be a mid-3 ERA kind of guy. And, along with that, the top 4 guys in the rotation, when this rotation gets healthy, they need to start shoving, because not only is that number 5 spot looking weak, but this team it's looking kind of dark right now. However, last year on this day, Slam Diego was born. Slam Diego was the start of, a really good, not the start, but it was a bounce back for a really good 2020. And that was when this team really turned it on and became the team that we know they are. So hopefully this day is the day to turn it around as well.
Yeah, and with Isaac mentioning Darvish now and that he is our ace, we don't really have a pitcher in the rotation where we can go out when he's on the mound and be like, yeah, you know what? He's going to hold down this game. We're going to get this W. I feel like the closest thing we have to that is Musgrove, but even then, he goes through some really rough stretches. We saw it in his last outing. He got rough really bad, and then he'll go through a couple of games like this, and then he'll come back and be his normal self. But in some game time situations, especially against the Dodgers and some higher teams, he struggled a little bit, and it kind of concerns us. And then even when he's on the mound, he doesn't get a lot of run support. So going into the game, you're just like, wow, this could go either way. Snell too. Snell's like, yeah, he can have some great outings, but there's other outings where he gets completely demolished or he just located at all. The Diamondbacks game, he had I think 70 pitches, almost 70 pitches by the third inning. I was there. He was missing a lot of pitches down, just outside, just all over the place. So yeah, without Darvish, we don't really have a stone in the rotation that we need. And so yeah, it's going to be rough. It's going to be a rough couple of weeks without those two. But we are built for the playoffs. We are built for, getting on hot streaks. And yeah, we do need to win games now. But if we get on a hot streak towards the end of the season to either sneak into wild cards or secure our spot, I think it's the most important time to do it, because we've seen the wild card teams in the past couple of years, or the past 5 years. The Giants were wild card series teams when they won the World Series. The Royals went on an amazing streak to make it to the World Series. The Nationals. So even if we make the wild card, it's just whoever gets hot at the end of September. That's who ends up winning it.
No, it's definitely true. I mean, I think that's a big point to bring up. Are the Padres in a good spot right now? Absolutely not. We're not saying that. But when you look at it and you go, okay, if these guys come back, if they can pitch really, not even if they can pitch really well, if they can put up a 4 ERA, both these two guys and the whole staff, if the starting rotation can average a 4 ERA and 6 innings pitched, they will be in a very good spot to both make the playoffs and go on a big run. This is a really good lineup. Now, we've seen that they're a very inconsistent lineup. However, when they're on, they can really get going. And if you have Fernando Tatis in the lineup, you have a chance every single night. Problem with Yu Darvish, last 7 starts, he's 0-5 with a 7.13 ERA, averaging 5 innings pitched. That's terrible. We talked about Weathers going into last night. Over his last 7, he had over an 8 ERA, and there was no reason to throw him out there. Hopefully, this Darvish's hiccups are more about, in terms of the injuries, and he's going to figure it out, and hopefully that's what it is. But if he just comes back and he can just, be a 4 ERA guy, I'm completely happy with that. Now, looking into Chris Paddack, everyone, I think in the middle of the season, everyone had decided that Chris Paddack just sucks. I don't think Chris Paddack sucks. I don't like Chris Paddack, in terms of the guys I'm really loving. I love when, and we had talked about this, when Blake Snell goes out there and pumps, it is hype. Chris Paddack is a very frustrating player to watch. And don't get me wrong, Blake Snell is too. But when he's on it, it's super hype, right? Chris Paddack hasn't really felt that way since his rookie year. And I think a lot of people have completely given up on Chris Paddack moving forward. Now, we both see him as a solid back-end starter, or we all three. I think that's where we're at. A solid back-end starter is what he should be. And we were looking back at some guys that had some early hiccups in their career, and there are 2 guys. And before I mention their names, we are not saying that Chris Paddack is going to turn into a Hall of Fame talent like these guys. However, it is good to point out that guys struggle early on very often. We brought up that about Ryan Weathers. Yes, he's in this bad spot, and our point was basically, please stop starting this man. Let him go down to the minors. Let him figure out his stuff and then bring him back, because he's a very talented player. We all think that. Now, Chris Paddack, early on in his career, we remember the rookie year, right? He had under a 1 whip that year. But it was really hot at the beginning. Then he kind of phased out. Then last year, he had a 4.7 ERA, and this year right now he has a 5.1. Roy Halladay, early in his career, first year, he comes in, he pitches 2 games, has a sub-2 ERA. Then the next year he comes out, pitches 18 games, has a 3.9 ERA. And then the year after that, his 3rd year, which would be Paddack this year, kind of 60-game season to now, that kind of area. He pitched 13 games in that year with over a 10 ERA. He heavily struggled. Made some changes, came back, became Roy Halladay, the Hall of Famer. Now, I don't expect Chris Paddack to do that, but I think that we should expect Chris Paddack to make some improvements. And fingers crossed that that's after this IL stint, because that's the big thing. And that could very well be next year, even a year after this, because there's been some hiccups in a lot of these guys' development. But Chris Paddack could potentially improve drastically. And Isaac, you had another guy that had a similar like early like struggles on in his career. Do you want to bring him up real quick?
Yeah. Again, we're not comparing these guys. We're not comparing these guys to Chris Paddack or vice versa. Obviously, these guys are Hall of Famers, Cy Young winners. They're fantastic pitchers, and I don't think I'm a huge Paddack fan, but I don't think Paddack is up to the level of these guys whatsoever. However, we're just trying to say there is a chance to bounce back, and there's plenty of examples of it. Another one, 5-time Cy Young Award winner, Randy Johnson, noted that his when he started being the Randy Johnson that we know, it wasn't until his age 29 season. So it took him a little while. He struggled at the beginning of his career too. However, that dude was nasty. Chris Paddack is not very nasty. But like I said, chance to bounce back. I don't expect anything crazy from Chris Paddack. We just need him to go out there and just not even be rookie Chris Paddack. Just be somewhat close to that, because we're in desperate need of something like that right now. Of an energizer, of a guy on the mound that I don't think Chris Paddack will be this, but we need someone on the mound that's going to give us a guaranteed W. Because if you look at the playoff teams, right, you go to the Giants, and I don't think Gosman and Desclafani are guaranteed Ws, but they give us, they give the Giants a lot better chance to win than any of the guys in our rotation right now. You look at the Brewers, Woodruff, Burns, they're nasty. They give them almost a guaranteed W. I'm missing one person. I'm forgetting the name.
Freddie Peralta.
Yes, that dude is nasty too. They're doing great. Then you look at, the Dodgers, Buehler, Scherzer, and they're missing guys too, and they got Buehler and Scherzer up there pumping. So, I mean, these guys have guys in the rotation. If you look at the Reds, Sonny Gray, Luis Castillo, Wade Miley, they're all going out there and giving their teams better chances than our guys. We need someone out there that's going to provide us those W's, because right now it's looking bleak. Weathers, he's doing horrible, but there's no reason he should be put in such a big situation, such a big spot to succeed. He's such a young pitcher, and there's no reason he should be going out there with, the weight of the Padres on his shoulders. There's no reason. He needs to get sent back down. He needs to work on some things before he can take on that kind of pressure, which is why Adrian Martinez, age 24, he's a little more matured, and maybe he's a little better suited for this kind of situation. Can also look at, I don't think Gore will come around anytime soon. You never know, but he just hasn't pitched in such a long time. But the weight of the Padres relies on the starting pitching. Yu Darvish, Chris Paddack, it's going to be huge just to have him come back. But it's only huge if they're able to produce. If Yu was able to produce the way we know he could, and if Paddack is able to produce the way we think he could. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. But I do think there's one thing that we haven't mentioned yet, and that we should mention, is that all these guys didn't have Larry Rothschild as a pitching coach. We haven't been the biggest fans of him. He might get his own segment later on again. But yeah, Larry Rothschild can be attributed to some of the, pitchers, downfalls and injuries, whatnot, just from throughout the year. Some of them may not be his fault, but we can attribute something to him and the struggling rotation and bullpen. But yeah, other than that, yeah, Chris Paddack, as long as he's like a mid threes guy and a back end piece, that's great. We really need him. He will go out in games, and he may not strike out a lot of people, but he doesn't let his pitch count get very high, so he can go 6-7 innings whenever the Padres really need to. That's if Tingler doesn't pull him out early. Once Darvish gets back, hopefully it was the injuries that were causing him to slip, and if he's back, it'll be fine. And yeah, Adrian Martinez definitely needs to get called up. Having him and kind of Reese Neer, hopefully they just piggyback those two for full game, because both of them are capable of going 6-7 innings. We've seen it when Reese Neer gets sent down to the minor leagues. One of the times he threw 7 scoreless innings. Tingler lets him go 2 1/3 inning with 50 pitches. You got to let him, extend himself out, prove that he can be an innings eater at the major league level. And if not, let him at least go 4, and then let Miggy Diaz go 2 or 3. Because if you do these bullpen days, we've seen it. We saw it last year. These bullpen days, they get taxed the bullpen over and over again. You're setting yourself up for disaster come September and playoffs.
I do have to say, I think the Padres do pretty well in those bullpen days. But you're right, Chase. Like they're getting super taxed. Where if you have a day where you have Near and then Martinez throw, and they go, let's say they go combine 7 or 8, that's not really a bullpen day, like, and you can really save a lot of these guys on, and you can give some good innings. Like Near's been pretty solid when he's played, at least in my opinion. I feel like I've been pretty happy with what I've seen from him. If Adrian Martinez got called up, I feel pretty decently confident with him. But like we all were saying, a lot of the season's going to rely on how do Yu Darvish, how do Chris Paddack look when they come back? Can they be those guys? Because for me, that's literally all I'm asking. Can the rotation just consistently give 6 innings and about a 4 ERA? If you could do that, I think they have a great chance. I think that we should expect them to make the playoffs if that's the case. The problem is the last month or to like 6 weeks, it has been the exact opposite of that. And you guys really need to turn it around in terms of that. So am I concerned? Are we all concerned? 100%. Is there a path to have this team make the playoffs and do really well? There's still 100% that as well. So really weird spot right now. Very weird spot. Not a spot that we thought they were going to be in, especially 2 months ago. I don't think anyone would have been expecting this. But we'll see how it plays out. This is going to do it for today's episode. We are going to be going live tomorrow. Answer any of your guys' questions. Probably going to be mostly about the pitching. It'll be more oriented around Jake Arrieta and his first start. But we will go 40 minutes before the game starts. So I believe that is 11:30 Pacific time. But yeah, we'll be talking then. And that's going to do it for today's episode. Thanks everyone for listening. And we'll talk to you guys